Unmuted now. Camera.
Hello and welcome once again to Android Developer Office Hours. My name is Joe Mallon, and with me today are Alex Lucas, Rich Volker, and Trevor Johns. And Bruno Oliveira is with us there he is in Brazil, via the miracle of electronics. Let's go right to our questions from Google Moderator. The top one today is, when will the action bar be available in the support library, and how to code if I want to use map fragment? What is the dirty trick?
All right, I'll take the first question there, because that's actually on my plate, so I'm the one to blame for it not being launched yet. The answer is we're working on it. We're trying to get it out to all of you developers as quickly as possible. There's still some work that needs to be done on it, so we will push it out live as soon as it's ready. So patience. Hopefully soon.
Okay, does anybody else have a comment on the second part? My question is, I work with MapView, and so my question is, are you trying to use MapView in a fragment, or are you trying to use a map fragment? It's really difficult to tell what's going on. Right now, the only thing that we support is what's called the MapView view, which requires you to extend your activity with a class called MapActivity. So fragments are not supported with the Android API for maps.
Actually, isn't there I want to know, there actually is there a map fragment, or no? We never did publish a map fragment, did we?
The weather is very nice outside.
Yeah, so I don't think there is a map fragment right now. So yeah, right. That actually is right now that I remember. So some tricks we've recommended to people in the past is to go and create a transparent activity like a pop-up, and you have a button, and when you push that button, pop up your map in that transparent activity, and that'll let you go and display a map without having it consume the entire available screen space. It'll still be a layer on top of your existing fragments, and it is a modal experience, but it can try and help preserve the tablet feel in the absence of a way to go and place a map view inside of a fragment. So that's one approach. Of course, you can also go and have a link directly to maps, or just have a standalone map activity and design around that. But you will have to be a little bit creative in how you display maps for now.
Okay, thank you. Nothing in the Hangout, so let's move to the next question on Moderator. Is there any way so when a notification is clicked, a new task isn't started if the user is on the destinated activity? Single top flag or something similar doesn't seem to work here.
That's a good question, actually. I was hoping somebody from the UI team would know, but I'm not hearing anything from anywhere else in the room, so I'm guessing nobody here actually knows the answer to this one, right?
Well, I can venture some observations here. There's nothing wrong with going back to the same task, although you can get into trouble that way. The issue is not whether you go to a new or the same task. The issue is how you construct the backstack for the task that you go to, because if you're not careful, you'll screw up the user's navigation experience. In general, we prefer that when the user clicks a notification, you start a new task, even if they're going to the same activity, so that they can navigate correctly in all situations. And this is explained more clearly. This is explained pretty well in the current documentation for notifications in the API guide. So, in general, we don't want to use the same task over again, because going backwards from it would cause the user to go to a different place than what they expected.
Yeah,
and that's documented in the current documentation.
Yeah, that's a good point. Also, I was doing some testing a moment ago here on my tablet, and let's take Gmail as an example. So if you have a Gmail notification in your notification bar, and then you switch into Gmail, it removes that notification. So you might want to consider whether it's even appropriate to still have that notification present when the user is already inside of your app. I think actually pretty much all of the system apps work that way. I think Talk does the same thing. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. The idea behind the notification is if the user is somewhere else, you want to bring them into your app. If they're already inside of your app, it might make sense to use a notification mechanism that's actually part of your application itself and then hide the system notifications. It's a little awkward to go and you have to pull down the bar, the notification bar, when you're already present. So maybe just taking a step back from the code and actually just looking at your UI design, it might not be the best option to keep that notification there.
Yeah, I think that what the original poster is saying is that he or she wants to be able to have the user click on a notification and go back to the activity. If the activity that should be gone to, the destination activity is already, the user's already in that destination activity, that they don't create a new task.
Right. Oh, so if it's in the background, but bring it to the foreground.
Or if the destination activity is in the foreground and the alert comes up.
Right. But my argument is that if it is in the foreground, you shouldn't even have that notification to begin with. Ah, there's a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So Rich.
I agree. I think it's pretty rare that you would need to call upon that notification while you're in your application already. There can be a couple of occasions where that makes some sense. If your app maintains a variety of parallel contexts, Talk could actually be a good example where I could be in one chat, but I might wish to still be notified about activity that's happening in a different chat that is in foreground. So there are occasions where you can call that forward, but I think the general guidance that's been given of you want to kind of wholly recreate that task stack upon that switch is completely appropriate.
Right. I can see some situations in which the notification would be issued by a background service while the user was in an activity that works in conjunction with that service.
Okay. Dan, we actually just lost our studio monitors, right? Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that, so we don't have anybody from the market team here, so I don't think any of us can actually say whether or not this has been considered. Signing is certainly an issue. There are ways that in theory could be worked around, for example, signing each individual package, but it would require some pretty substantial architectural modifications to the way the APK format works. So I'll just say that that's really good feedback. We'll make sure that the team hears about it, and if they haven't considered it, we'll let them know. But as far as whether or not we actually have or not, I don't think anybody here is actually qualified to answer that. But thank you for the feature request. It's a good one. I like it.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Bruno.
He literally took right next to me. Yeah, I want to say shortcuts were probably documented at some point in the past. I'm wondering if they were deprecated with, I'm not 100% sure. It's odd for us to deprecate Yeah, I'm going to make a note to myself. we'll try and get you an answer during next week's episode and let you know, what the status of these are, whether or not it's something you should be using, what the reason is for it not being documented. We'll get you some more info.
Okay. Next question. In Honeycomb tablets, we can touch notification icon and see now we're on the
Yeah, so I can speak to that one. It was changed partly in response to user feedback and some of the testing and just kind of use of the product that we went through. One observation we had is that when users kind of learn that behavior of tapping the individual icons, in some cases they did not learn kind of that there was also a drawer containing all of the content that was available there. So it became actually more laborious for those types of users to kind of have to progress through each of those icons in sequence with each of those notifications in sequence with discrete touches. We also were a little concerned about the scalability of how many of those icons we could present, where they would wind up. In general, we just kind of, in ICS, we did a lot of things to kind of unify from tablet decisions on back to phone. This is one of the things that makes the phone and tablet experience more direct, more consistent. And I guess I would further add that with some of the new notification behaviors that we've introduced in Jelly Bean, with kind of expandable and compactable notifications, it's all the more reason to kind of drive users to a single location where they can open up. We can present the most important notifications in a more expanded fashion. We're doing more in terms of kind of organizing that set in a really more meaningful way for the user. So rather than have a variety of kind of small contexts that the user would go to, we just drive the user towards one centralized location for managing notifications.
Okay, so for those of you who aren't aren't sitting on stage, we just lost Joe's mic here, so we're trying to figure out what's going on with that. Let's see. Are you getting a low battery light?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Do we have any spare batteries?
Yes, we do. I'll take care of it while these people are talking.
All right. Do you want me to take the next question?
Well, how about the answer about device manufacturers and enabling this?
All right. You can unmute Joe's mic for a second so people can actually hear him. There we go. Sorry. Say that again.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, how about the question of device manufacturers re-enabling this feature or doing this feature differently?
I would advise against it. I think it's the kind of thing that there aren't all that many system conventions that we expect all of the devices to adhere to. I think in general the notification and kind of status and system navigation areas are things where we expect as close coherence as possible. That's not a hard no, you can't do it, but I worry a little bit that kind of going somewhere differently with that behavior may kind of separate you from future enhancements to the notification system.
Okay, I think I have returned to the land of the living here. We'll see what happens.
Actually, I think your mic was muted for that last sentence. But yeah, I think
Yes?
Joe's mic is back now.
I'm back now.
You're good.
Okay, I am good. Let us proceed. Thank you, Rich.
Sure.
Here's an interesting one. How can I normally import API demos project into Eclipse? When I've imported API demo sample, a pile of errors appears. I've made project clean, added support library, but no result. What is the problem in importing projects to Eclipse?
That's a good question, because it should work. Normally, the process for adding a demo normal samples should work just fine. Inside of API demos, however, each of those, what you've used individual samples is actually just a collection of classes. If you try and add, one of the subfolders, there's no Android manifest, there's the layouts are in a top-level folder, that's not going to work. So you can't just go and take one of those subfolders, strip it out, and expect it to build as a standalone project. Now, if you want, you can create a brand new project from scratch, copy your classes in, copy the layout file in, copy the resources files in, And if you do that, you can get it to build as a standalone project. But API Demos wasn't designed with that in mind. The first goal of API Demos, honestly, is actually to go and be our sandbox for our engineers to play with. And in addition, it will also give you a file-level demonstration of how these things work. But it's really not designed to work in standalone mode. That's where the rest of the samples, this part of the framework, or this part of the SDK, come into play. And that's sort of the distinction between what goes into API demos and what doesn't. Is it something that should be standalone? So the errors you're getting is because you're trying to import something that's not actually an Android project. If you go one level up, import just all of API demos as a whole, that should build. And if it doesn't, let us know what error you're getting, and we can look into it a bit more. But that should work.
Okay. Next question is, how does Google Plus achieve the horizontal scrolling navigation when you turn your phone into landscape mode?
Excellent question. I can't tell you exactly how Google Plus does it. I suspect what they do is they have something like a grid view that they've modified to go and support horizontal scrolling. I believe, Alex, I think you've looked into this in the past, correct?
My understanding is actually just what you said. It's a heavily modified grid view.
Yeah, so one of the nice things about Android is the entire framework is open source. If there's some feature that you'd like in one of the internal classes like grid view that's not there, for example, horizontal scrolling, it's entirely possible to just go and grab the source code for that file, copy it into your project and make your changes, and then you just be using your own local copy of grid view. Of course, we do want to provide a framework that works as is without needing to modify this stuff, but every now and then you do have some advanced feature that's beyond what the framework designers had intended when they designed the class. Alright, I think Joe lost his microphone again, so I'm going to go ahead and read the next question. So this is from Magma Spawn in Colorado Springs, and the question is, what things are being addressed in terms of stability? Android versus iOS. Apple developers make apps that generally are made to run a specified processor and RAM and screen size. Android is so developmental that you risk stability doing so. Stability equals slow. And I'm just going to say I disagree with that entirely. I think, yes, Okay.
Well, there we are. Okay.
All right. Yeah, I mean, other platforms like iOS, there are less device configurations to worry about, but this isn't anything new for developers. Take a look at desktop PCs, right? The user can go and adjust their window size. You have devices with different RAM. You have definitely more processor, a wider range of processor speeds than you'll find on Android, just because the PC platform's been around for so long. And as a developer, you have to take these things into account. Now, unlike the PC platform, we go and give you a lot of tools to go and manage this. You can use things like filters to go and make sure your device can't be installed on platforms where it doesn't work. We have a very robust layout system that makes it very easy to go and handle different screen sizes and different densities. And there's a lot of tools here that, I don't want to bash iOS, but we do provide a lot of tools that they don't for handling different screen sizes, because it's something that Android's had to deal with since pretty much the very beginning, since Android 1.6 to be specific. So we've gone to great lengths to go and make this easy for developers. Yes, it's an extra consideration, but the tools are there to go and make your life, to make your life pleasant while you do this, and I don't think it slows things down. If anything, it's actually a benefit to the Android ecosystem, because it means you have more devices out there with more options. OEMs are able to innovate faster, developers are able to innovate faster on top of those features, and I think the end result is a much better experience for end users, a much better experience for developers. So I think I've beaten that to death. But anybody else have anything they want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm not really. I have a question about what's really meant here, because stability to me suggests that in every new version of Android that's released, there are a lot of bugs that were introduced in that version. And
yeah, stability has a lot of different definitions.
Yeah.
Like it could be, is it bugginess, API changes?
Right.
I'm not clear what you mean by stability. I mean, as far as bugginess, I don't think that's the case at all. Android, on the whole, is very stable, especially the things you're talking about here, like screen size, things like that. And API changes, again, we had one big API change back in 1.6 where we added support for multiple resolutions. But since then, there hasn't been very much that's changed there. I mean, we've added additional functionality, but we've maintained backwards compatibility all the way back to Android 1.0.
Right. I think that the point here is maybe that Apple developers make apps that they can focus on one particular device, and Android varies because there are new devices coming out all the time, and so you risk so-called stability because you're writing for devices that you may not be aware of, and that so-called changes your app. It shouldn't. And we try to make it so that we provide tools that allow you to write the same app for a variety of different devices of different sizes, RAM sizes, screen sizes. So that would be my comment. Any others?
Yeah, well, one thing that is always nice to point out is that it's not 1,000 times the effort, but your app runs on 1,000 times the number of devices. So because Android is running like on 1,000 devices. So actually, if you think about desktop applications, every single desktop that anyone has at their home is a different device. So even though Android launches new devices every now and then, I mean it's not more difficult than developing desktop applications. So some people say, "Oh, Android is fragmented." I think it's the reverse. Android is sort of like the answer to fragmentation, because we have a very stable set of tools and a very robust set of tools to deal with device diversity. So you can't talk about Android without talking about diversity. I mean, diversity is one of those core values that the platform doesn't exist without.
Right. Very good point. Thank you, Bruno.
And
Yeah.
I know this question is addressing kind of coding the apps specifically, but just from a design standpoint, it's part of it is just kind of putting yourself in the right mindset for kind of how you think about an app and how you think about a device. And I know the process that I go through as like a UI designer when I sit down to work on a new Android application is to really start kind of at a very early stage, start kind of sketching that app in a variety of different scales. I often kind of work a set of wireframes where I'm thinking about, even within a device, I'm thinking about portrait, I'm thinking about landscape, I'm thinking about kind of the different sizes of screen and the different sizes of, kind of 3.5, 4.5, 7, 10-inch displays, and how to kind of divide the tasks across that. It is a little bit more work, but I think it also kind of conceiving of your app across that kind of multiplicity of presentations actually helps kind of frame your thinking about what this app is trying to be for the user in different contexts. And I would imagine kind of a lot of that same thinking would apply to how you're actually architecting the app.
Right, and I imagine a lot of those same decisions are things that web designers need to deal with nowadays too, right?
Yes.
I mean that's why things like CSS media queries were invented, so that you can go and have your app, gracefully convert from something running on a desktop device to a tablet to a phone. As the screens get smaller, your layout will just go and dynamically adjust. Android works the same way. And to answer your question as to whether or not this is slowing things down or not, I mean, Android. Look at all the growth in Android in the last couple of years, and look at all the growth in the web over the last 2 years. Both of them have been developing at an extremely rapid pace. So I really don't think this is slowing things down, either for developers or for the platform.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question. What are the current options for NFC developing, and can it be integrated with a compatible RFID device? Example, NFC phone communicating with third-party RFID chip, NFC magstripe for some sort of identity authentication for an application.
All right. So first off, you're using 3 different terms here. You have NFC, which is a specific technology within the broader field of RFID. RFID encompasses a lot of devices. And then on top of that, magstripe is a completely separate technology altogether, right? That's like the strip on the back of your credit card. That's technology from back in the early 80s or possibly earlier, cassette tapes, right? So NFC, to answer your broader question though, can you use NFC with third-party devices? And the answer to that is absolutely. So NFC is an open standard. If you search online for NFC Forum, you can find the group that actually has developed those standards. Thankfully, as a developer, you typically don't have to read them unless you're implementing new hardware. But any device that conforms to the NFC spec is compatible with Android. So normally there's two modes that you'll typically want to find yourself working in. You can do tag emulation, which is, say what, if you buy those little NFC stickers online, that's tag emulation. You can buy third-party tag readers and transmit a program tag that you create in your app from your Android device to the tag reader. You can also do the opposite, right? You can buy, just like I said, you can buy stickers online that are tags, program them. You can even program them with your Android phone and read them. You can also do peer-to-peer mode, so you can go and configure your NFC reader writer to go and talk bidirectionally with the device. And so that's how things like Android Beam work. And to give you an example of, in practice, for Google I/O we built something we call Kegdroid. It's a big, kegerator with a giant model Android on top with arms that dispense beers. Pretty cool. We originally were going to go and use NFC attendee badges. Sadly, that didn't work out this year. But we built an NFC reader into it using an Arduino along with a NFC prototyping kit that we bought from SparkFun. And it's using open source libraries to go and handle the NFC communication, and it works just fine. It works beautifully. I'm sad we didn't get a chance to demo that part of it really well at I/O. We did have some sample badges there, but it's entirely possible. There aren't any open source libraries for Arduino that I found that work in peer-to-peer mode. There's no reason you couldn't write them, but tag emulation is definitely supported in the open source libraries. On top of that, if you want to go even further, Android does provide low-level access to the NFC hardware. You can open up a raw connection to whatever NFC device you're speaking to. And so if you're using something that Android doesn't have built-in support for, but still falls within one of the NFC specs, you can always go and write your own library to go and handle the protocol that way too. So that's an option. I will add the NFC is a big field. There's a lot of different options out there. There's 4 different types of standardized NFC tags, type 1, 2, 3, and 4, as well as some more proprietary options like MeFair Classic that's only supported on some devices. So the caution I just want to give you there, be careful what devices you're speaking to and what protocol they use for the actual NFC side of things. My advice is stick to the technologies that are standardized as part of the NFC forum, so that's the type 1, 2, 3, and 4 tags, and that way you'll have the broadest compatibility with Android devices. MeFair Classic is the one in particular I want to caution you against. It works fine with Android devices today, but that's because most of them use a NFC chipset manufactured by NXP, which is the company that owns MeFair. So there are other NFC companies out there that don't support MeFair Classic, so just be careful.
Okay.
That's a lot of information, I know.
Right. How about this thing about identity authentication for an application, communicating with a NFC something or other to identify something? Would that work?
Yeah, it totally would work. Identity and authorization is a pretty big field. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. Most of the parallels from web programming apply here. So the easiest option is you can just go and broadcast a static ID and have the other end pick it up, and that works fine. It's pretty easy to implement. You could just do it as a normal NDEF payload, put your ID in there as an integer, it would work. The thing you do have to watch out for though is NFC is a radio-based technology, and it is susceptible to eavesdropping and potentially cloning if you do that. And so the answer to that is to build cryptography on top of that. And so that's how things like NFC-enabled credit cards work. You go and do a challenge response type exchange, or use something like RSA. So you have a private key inside of your phone and a public key in your whatever you're authenticating to, and then your phone would sign something like a timestamp to prove that yes, I own the private key, without ever actually broadcasting it over the airwaves. So totally possible. It's just a matter of how you want to implement it. There's a lot of resources out there on how to handle this on the web side of things. I'd definitely brush up on that if you haven't already. And literally, it's no different than opening a TCP socket to some random server, except rather than doing it over IP, you're doing it over the NFC protocol.
Thanks. Great answer. This question looks like it's specifically for Rich. Rich Fulcher, what's the reasoning behind the Nexus S keeping its 2.3 touch camera shutter sounds on 4.x? If it looks like Holo, shouldn't it sound like Holo also?
So, good question. I actually don't have a specific answer for this, unfortunately. I will take it back to the camera team. But I do agree. Yes, the Holo as a theme is not intended to merely be kind of the visual cosmetic aspect of the device, but it's also meant to cover the entire soundscape. All the beeps and bloops that the device makes are kind of part of that feel and that overall sensation that we're going for with Holo. So I will follow up on this question. Sorry, I don't have a specific answer for you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to skip the next question because I'm not really sure what it means. Perhaps we have received our first spam in developer office hours.
2007?
Yeah,
Where's
2007.
the time machine?
Yeah, really. We have to go back we're being directed to go back to 2007, and I don't know why. So I'm going to
Actually, if that's a question, then are we on 2007? The answer is false. The year is 2012.
Oh,
Answered.
I thought I was going to answer 42, but okay, false is also good. The question after that is, what practical damage can occur if my activity handles the configuration changes? On retained non-configuration instance, the doc state, you must not rely on it being called. Is this correct for configuring change itself?
I'll take this one.
Okay.
Okay, so first of all, on retained non-configuration instance is actually deprecated. So you don't have to worry about whether or not it's being called because you shouldn't really be using it. Instead, Fragment now has a method called setRetainInstance. And I think it's called setRetainInstance. It's setRetain something. The important part is that what this does is it means that the fragment will not be destroyed and recreated across destruction of the parent activity. So anything that you need to save between, say, device rotations, if you put in that fragment, it will still be there when the new activity creates itself. Go ahead.
One important thing to point out is that it's on retained instance. The set retained instance is actually also available in the App Combat library. So this means that you can also use it before Honeycomb.
Oh, great.
Cool.
So that's awesome. That means it goes all the way back to, how far back do we take fragments?
Depends on which one's in. There is a V4 version of the support library. I don't know whether this is part of V4 or one of the later versions, but if it's in V4, it goes all the way back to...
That would go all the way back to Donut, right?
Yes, Donut.
Yeah. To answer the first part of what practical damage can occur if my activity handles the configuration changes, basically to start lots and lots of memory leaks if you're not destroying all the things that shouldn't be around anymore. I'm sure there's all sorts of side effects for things that you can't destroy, but that sort of falls under the area of undefined behavior. I can't exactly, we can't really provide a list of, top 3 things that will go wrong, but the easy way to do this is just not to worry about any of that stuff and just use use the fragments set retain instance method.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left, but I want to take a moment to remind viewers that if you are watching live, you are welcome to join us on Hangout and ask us questions live. I think we've made it through an entire episode without any live questions, even though I see a full Hangout over on Daniel's screen. So for those of you guys who are in the Hangout, first off, why haven't you asked a question yet? And second off, for those of you who have questions and are feeling a bit shy, you're certainly welcome to hop on and ask us questions live. We love to answer them.
So we actually have a text question, which I can read to you guys.
Yes.
Pretty much the only question we've had all day.
What are you guys who are? If you're in the Hangout and you don't have a question, why are you in the Hangout?
Maybe they've been satisfied with all the great questions we've had
You guys
so
are doing
far.
a great job.
Yeah.
So this question's from Phil. He actually doesn't seem any video, but I'll
Okay.
ask it for him. So this question is: looks like there's a problem with manifest me RGER. I can successfully package and install with the debug key, but when I try to sign the app for deployment, the classes in the libraries go missing in runtime. Is this something you guys have noticed?
Wait, what's the class name again there?
Class name...
He said Manifest Manager?
Manifest ME.
Manifest Merger.
Yeah.
This is not an issue I've actually ever encountered.
No, me either. Are all the source files in the same project? Because what I have seen before is if people import external jars or external like shared libraries from
Right.
separate projects, they get bundled into a jar, and sometimes depending on how the way they access them, ProGuard might sort of optimize away the classes that it doesn't see being called within whatever project is being compiled.
Yep. Another thing that can get you in trouble too is if you're using tools like IntelliJ, which go and look up references inside the IDE for you. They have their own build path, which is sometimes separate from what the Android build script uses. For that reason, any dependencies you have should almost invariably go into a lib folder. Even if you configure it in your IDE, I still recommend using a lib folder because that's what a lot of the command line tools expect. It's sort of a magic location, just like resources and source. On top of the only exception there would be library projects, which of course will live in a different folder.
I think it's libs, right? L-I-B-S?
Probably.
Yes.
I can never remember whether or not it's plural.
L-I-B-S. I don't know whether that helps. If you need any more information, you can always post a note, post something on Stack Overflow, and then put a link to it in the notes for moderators so that we can take a look at it further. Since we've got 5 minutes left, I'm going to move through real quick here.
Actually, we have about 2 minutes left now.
Okay, so we've got 2 minutes left, which is good for this next question, which is UX guests. What would you say are the top 3 most common developer pitfalls related to your I/O topics?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So maybe I guess I'll start by covering one pitfall from the topic that I covered, which was kind of the up and back navigation within Android. And I think the biggest pitfall that we still see even developers working within Google falling prey to occasionally is handling notifications and properly kind of building out the backstack. We had a question about that at the start of the Hangout today. It was a change. It was a change that we introduced back in ICS that we stuck with for Jelly Bean. Haven't changed anything else for you. But just be particularly careful when handling that. Notifications get tricky because they generally navigate you to a screen deep within your application's hierarchy, and you need to kind of properly construct a corresponding task stack so that back will behave properly, keeping you within the app and navigating as expected. And we go through that in pretty complete detail in the session, so feel free to refer back to that. For the other topics, I guess a general topic that came up is more of a philosophy, which is just be lazy. Be lazy in the sense of let the framework do as much lifting for you as it can. At this point, it is a nicely mature framework. You can get support for action bars, for a lot of the components that you would want to use in your application. You don't need to go custom. We have a phrase that we use within our design group here, which is that we want our designs to deviate with purpose. We try to use the standard conventions wherever we can. It's good for you as the developer. It's good for the user because it's the expected behavior. And it's not, you shouldn't change it. It's when you make a change, make sure it's a very thoughtful change, that it's something that's really meaningful and important for your application. And for stuff that isn't so important, just lean back on what the framework provides. Don't put your heavy investment into having a very custom settings screen. Use the preference framework to kind of build that out easily, and you won't have to kind of revisit it as aggressively through further versions of Android.
Great. Thank you, Rich.
Sure.
We seem to have reached the end of our time with you today. I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention Daniel Pham, who's our engineer today. Thank you, Daniel. Otherwise, we don't have anything left for you today. We'll wish you good luck and happy programming, and see you next time.
Yep, as always, we're here every Wednesday, 2 p.m. Pacific, and be sure to check in advance, submit your questions to moderator. We usually post the moderator a day or two in advance, and as always, be sure to join us for the live stream so you can ask questions live. All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.